Hey again, YouTube. Nudge up with Machete with that promised build video. So, decided to do the gift for a friend of my wife's. Friend of my wife's kid, sort of. Yeah, whatever. And so I'm going to be using one of the sets that I had bought. I'll do builds on the other ones, but nobody's indicated which one they'd prefer. Like they didn't put comments in the comment section below. Anyways, or go back and watch that one and pick one of the three styles you want me to build, and I will do that. I'm also using the lav mic, which is on the other side of where I thought it was. Let's put it over here. Maybe it'll sit better. And if you're wondering why I'm basically wearing an undershirt, it's because it's hot as balls today. We're not in the UK. Why is it 30 degrees? Which is also why I haven't done another video since then. I did just finish making a stitching pony, so I can do some leather work and stuff like that. But that was basically a couple hours today, and it was hot. So, anyways, so this one is a 6 1/4 inch Damascus, almost Skinner style. So this style, and it's got a very nice bolster on it. So it comes with sheath, slightly different style than the other ones where the leather comes over the top and bends back down. It comes with a little bit stitched on, and knife fits in there like so. And now it's just a matter of putting the handle scales on. So the bonus with these kits, especially with ColdLands, is you do get all the materials you need. There's no real instructions on them because how you build these is up to you. If you're wondering what I'm leaning on, this is a birthday present from my wife. She bought me a stackable tool chest. And this is literally where I'm going to put my knife making and leather working stuff so that I can kind of have them together and roll them out of the way rather than leaving them in the den where the cats are currently lying. So these sets come with everything you need. So this one came with, I think these are walnut handle scales. 2 of them. One for either side. But as you can see, it's a bit bigger than I needed. So I decided to place this on here. And then what I've done is I've actually backed it up as much as I can without missing any spots on here. And then traced it out on this side. And then I did the same thing on the other side. And what that gives me, rested straight up against the bolster, like right here. What that gives me is a nice little, once I traced it, my pencil marks are not readily visible, but it gives me a way to cut this on that angle, which I've just kind of marked up with a saw quickly, just so I can show you. And I can use this one for both sides. There's a couple of benefits to doing that. If you're really new at this like I am, what you might discover is when I first started doing these, what I would do is basically just like have the slab on there, and then have to work with getting rid of all of this material. When you see how I do this, it doesn't make a lot of sense if I had access to like other tools, like a bandsaw or something like that. I could easily nip this off. What I usually end up doing is I have an oscillating tool. I love my oscillating tool. I will usually use an oscillating tool because it's easier than trying to do this with a jigsaw. And I can get finer, like closer to this. What I was doing in the beginning, before I was gifted, thank you, Bonnie, my belt and disc sander, I had homemade, like I had a belt sander a 3-inch belt sander that I had made a base for. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I would use my detail sander, and like work on this. So they were perfectly fine in the end. But there were a lot of work to get them there. So what you have is not going to be what I have, and in fact, I'm hoping this will kind of give you an idea of you don't really need to have all fancy tools or anything like that, especially when you're using kits like ColdLand does, because they are very simple and very nice. They are a great way to get yourself started. And honestly, even if I did have access to a forge, sorry, I keep looking over there. It's been a while since I've used my camcorder, and I keep getting distracted by myself. But yeah, one of the, like, even if I did have access to my own forge, with these being like 80% done, it's really nice. It's a great way to like kind of keep up with things. And with these ones, they do let you customize sort of how you want. As a for instance, if this one didn't come with the bolster, you could get some brass plate, pin it in place. I prefer to glue and pin. You'll see that as we go along. Pin it in place, and you could have a brass bolster instead of the metal one. So, but anyways, yeah, I marked that off. That's just a little bit of water. It's one of the reasons I chose this side is I kind of splashed a little bit of something onto it, and I'm like, okay, that'll be the inside. So we'll take this outside, finish cutting it up. I am going to show you how lazy I am, and I'm going to do it with the oscillating tool and the little, just a clamp setup, and then I'll drill it using these as a marker. I'll show you how I do that, and we'll go from there. We'll do the glue up. Now, typically I use epoxy, and I want it to set up overnight. So you might see a different shirt, or you might see me wearing, again, the same essentially undershirt because it's hot. But I usually let the epoxy set up overnight. So any of these build videos, you might see change of clothes, something like that. Excuse me, hiccups. Yeah, you'll see something like that. And it's because I do want the glue up to take overnight. So, and yeah, I'll let you know what kind of epoxy I use in a minute. Coffee. Okay. So I'll take you guys outside and we'll do that. Okay, so I did promise you a look at where I work out of. This is our outside storage closet. You can see I don't really have a lot of space. We've got smoker hanging off the wall, camping supplies, starter tables, da-da-da-da-da. But you can see there, that, ladies and gentlemen, is my drill press. Next to it is my sander. The sander, I don't work in here with it. It kicks up a lot of dust, and, well, there's not a lot of space. But the drill press is too heavy to move all the time, so I often do my drilling directly in here, and I'll show you that when we drill. For right now, let's take a look at me using an oscillating tool like any old regular saw. Now, I'm hoping you can hear me because I have PPE on and I can't even hear myself. I'm not sure what I'm going to do about the audio when I turn this thing on, but my apologies. A headphone user's advanced warning. And yes, oscillating tool, because lazy. And yes, I am aware that was smoking. But that gave me 2 pieces of walnut. Now, let's grab the knife blank. And hello, little cat at the door. Make sure that this still works. And I didn't screw it up and gotta use the other one, which is totally possible. I've done that in the past. So let's find out. Take off my PPE. At least that one. Alright. So, it works fine there. Still works fine there. So, we can do up. Glue up. Now, I'm trying to figure out which side I like more on these. And I think I like them like that. So, there. Anyways, let's set you guys up on the next part of my little wonderful work spot. By the way, this is just a clamp-on vise on the banister. Okay, so I'll show you how I do this. And it was a tip that I'd picked up from a woodworking channel. First, make sure you clean this area with isopropyl alcohol. That'll make sure any grease or anything that was on there is done. Then, sorry about the noises in the background, it's hot and people are playing with squirt guns. Take painter's tape. It doesn't really matter as long as you get on there. You can always cut that off later. Make sure that's sticking down. Let me take this out of frame, cut that tape with, ironically enough, another knife I'm making for my wife, but she hasn't picked the handle scales for it yet. So, there we go. Just gonna rip the excess off some of these spots. Then, which side? Which? Yeah, that was a side cake. And do the same thing with a piece of wood. Put it up to the edge. And it doesn't have to be perfect. And literally what I'm going to do, a little bit of thin CA glue. I do not have activator. I don't pay for activators. So this will only take a second anyways. And in case you wanted to know the brand, there you go. That's what I have. And then, don't drop your knife. Make sure it's up against the bolster. Make sure you're at least at the edge, if not a little bit in from it. And give it a couple of seconds. And that CA glue will harden right up. And then, the purpose of this is so that then I've got this locked in place and I don't have to clamp it or anything like that, because clamping and then when you see the drill press you will laugh, trying to drill with my drill press is a royal pain in the ass. So that will let us do the drilling for these holes, which I've already checked is 330 seconds. So I've got a 30-second drill bit chucked up in my drill. Now let's go and do that. One of the other tips I forgot to mention, and I usually do this at the beginning, but I'm filming, so I am slightly thrown off. Tape up your knife blade. This. Don't deal with the sharpie, pointy, pokey. Tape up your knife blade. Make sure, I always use painter's tape, it's just easier. Make sure you cover up the sharp and the pokey. This one's slightly wider than the painter's tape I use. So just taking a couple more passes. And that will keep me, still a little pokey, but that'll keep me from slicing open or getting a new scar. So, yeah. Anyways, I've already got the 30-second drill bit in here. Let's see if I can move this sander slightly over so you can see. Again, I don't use this in here, but I do use this. Advanced warning for headphone wearers. I am literally wearing the lav mic, and as you can tell, I'm wearing PPE. And this is at a height I don't like, but this is what I got. So, anyone who's like, oh, you got to buy yourself X, Y, and Z, please don't. But yeah, let's double check. This is actually going to go through enough. Yep, perfect. That's clamped on tight. That's clamped on tight. Yeah, this is literally a Craftsman drill bit, or an old Black & Decker, in what is essentially a jury-rigged, bloody drill press. So it's what I can afford. And it's what fits in here. A full-size drill press obviously isn't going to fit even a small one. Anyways, loud now. There we go. Drilled through, and before anyone comments, I did actually work in a steel shop for some of my formative years. I have used really good stuff. This works. So let's make sure that the rod they've given us will fit through here. Bring off this backside. I find it easier when we test fit to just slide through from the metal side, because then any bits of wood just get pushed out. So that'll work just fine. So taped up the other side, and actually while I was fitting it on here, I realized I actually did make a little bit of an oopsie. And cut one slab about 1.5 millimeters shorter than the other side. So I have a tiny bit of metal that's probably going to be proud. So we'll deal with that when we get to the shaping part. I can always recut slabs, or what I'm planning to do is actually kind of incorporate that into the design, because as Bob Ross said, I don't even have to finish that, if you know what I'm talking about. If you guys are wondering what this is power cord for it. I've got a plug-in box on the wall behind you. So yeah, let's drill these in. The major upside about doing the tape and the super glue is repositionability, and the fact that you're not bonding everything together, and for me, the fact that I don't have to use clamps, because these get in the way so much. And then if I have clamps, you'll hear swearing. So loud. Now that we've got that drilled, both sides, just run the rod through, and you can see the wood didn't quite stay all the way down on the tape. That's because I had to reposition it, but the holes should still line up because the bolster was actually holding in place, which is a wonderful thing for this one. Middle. And back. I shifted the whole thing when I was putting it back together there. Ow. Back. So. It's hot in here, but it's probably easier to... Woo. Okay. I'm just going to move the tripod back. Sorry, you're going to get dizzy for a second, guys. Yes, we have wasps. Anyways, there's a couple of different things you can do right now, and I'm going to do one of them, obviously. Hang my PPE up is out of the way. You can glue up, which is usually the simpler thing. Glue up, and then you shape the material after your glue has dried. Now, if you want to just peen these in place, you can use the rod and peen it over. I prefer doing the rod and the glue. And that's kind of twofold. I like my handles to be really, really secure. I tend not to plan to remove them. And it feels better to me, I guess, while I'm doing it. I don't know. Personal preference. Just go with it. So yeah. But if you are going to shape it like this, then I'll show you what the next steps are, because we'll do that inside, because again, it's hot out here. I'm already shiny. And I had a shower like an hour ago. But this is why I have this on there. Take the scales off. Either the tape will stay attached to the knife or it'll stay attached to the scale. It doesn't really matter. You can just peel it off. Other side. A piece of tape stayed on there. And if you get a little bit of super glue on the knife, it's not a bad thing. Why doesn't that fit? It's because it's the other way. If your knife isn't curved and these pinholes are linear, having it traced out on your piece of wood is super handy. So, pro tip, I guess. Because yeah, sometimes when you're about to do the glue up, you may get a little frustrated or something like that, or you might, sometimes when you're mixing the epoxy, you get nervous, and this will help kind of decrease that. So let me unplug this. Oh, and there's a light in here, by the way. Yeah. I have one light. I should probably replace that with a CFL so I get a little bit better light in here. If you ever need to drill out these holes, which you'll see me do on one of the other build videos, you can use a high-speed bit with some lubricant. 3-in-1 will work, engine oil, anything like that. And if you need to step them up. Don't just try and go from this to an 8mm or something like that, because that's not going to work out well. Being done with this, I'm having a moment and trying to remember where I put my chuck key. This thing has gone through so many chuck keys because it's very well made. But the chuck keys I tend to buy usually end up not very well made. So yeah. And the drill bit set I keep out here is just this really old Ryobi set that I bought when I was still working at Home Depot. Way back in the day. So hang that up on the wall. So yeah, you definitely don't have to use expensive drill bits for this. All right, let's go inside and I'll show you what I was talking about with the epoxy. And let's get me out of this heat because it's hot. Did I mention it's hot? It's hot. It's hot. And I think one of the things I should invest in is a proper light for the camera. just because I know the light is behind me and it's going to shadow this, but sorry guys, this is what I got. Anyways, two-part epoxy. Let's make sure this is on camera. Two-part epoxy. I do like JB Weld if I can. If not, most two-part epoxies will work just fine. Even the dollar store stuff, I have done it and it worked okay. 5 minute, if you want, doesn't have to be. This is a silicone container, and I mixed the two-part epoxy in there. Makes it clean up a lot easier because then you can just pick the shit out. And then some Sterilite gloves or nitrile gloves, doesn't really matter. A couple of stir sticks. My brain is telling me I've forgotten something, and you know what I've forgotten, guys? Well, I've forgotten the thing that will hold all of this together. Yes, okay, technically the epoxy will, but you need it to... Oh, I enjoy having a lav mic so long as you guys can actually hear me as I'm walking through the house, putting on my gloves, looking like a serial killer. You actually have to hold everything in place while the epoxy dries. I thought I had 4 of these. Apparently I only have 3. I imagine the other one is floating around somewhere. Oh well. 3 ought to be enough. And what I'm referring to is I have little bark lamps. I'll show you how little. Oh, that's why. I had 4 of these, but one of them broke. These tiny little bark lamps. I use full-size ones normally, but this one's tiny, so I'm going to use tiny bark lamps. Just some ones I picked up from Princess Auto, and ironically enough, I think this was the Princess Auto brand, and this snapped off on one, and this broke off on the other, so I Frankenstein one together. Set them to bigger than your workpiece. Again, when you're working with this 5-minute epoxy, sometimes you'll get kind of worked up. So, and I've set these up so that this goes here, and then the brass can go in, or I'll do that before, and then it's basically set up so, you know, life is simple. I've cut the brass rod down, and it's a good idea to give it a quick sanding. Both for grip and because sometimes the brass will come tarnished. So sand it down. I've nipped it with a pair of side nips. Trying to keep this on camera. But what I actually want to do is I want to set them into one of the blocks first. And for that, I can do it 2 ways. You can preset them, dip them with CA glue, and pop them in there. Or you do what I'm about to do, just freak myself out slightly because now I've got a 5-minute timer going. You can always mix up too much 5-minute epoxy. I tend to. And give it a good mix. Some epoxies will change color when they're mixed up. Those ones are super handy. These clear ones don't. These kind of turn a little bit of a milky. So I'm going to leave that in there. Lift it up. Quick little bit on there. Set that into the wood. And just want to poke it through. I'm not going to... There. So it's like that. You don't want it flat, because just in case when you're shaping, if it's like that portion of the wood ends up being not taken down. Sorry, I told you. Doing this with 5-minute epoxy is slightly stressful. Yeah, if that's not taken down, shaped down, you'll have a void. So usually I end up cutting these slightly different lengths. The first time I did it, it was not on purpose, but now it is. So, yeah, let's see if I can get these in there. If you hear walking in the background, it's just my wife. I'm doing this in the kitchen. So, there. Like I said, leave them slightly proud. And I'm just loosening this up. You don't have to do it this way. You can put the glue on, but with these rods being still so slightly bendable, I have found this is a way that works fairly well. So I'll put epoxy on both parts. That's why I like using these little stir sticks, because they're just about the right size for this. And before you do this, it's a good idea to wipe down the steel with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, even though you already did that before you did the test fit. All right, that's enough. Press it down. Make sure those are all still sitting proud. Now you got 5 minutes. So at this point, take the remainder of your epoxy. Like I said, you can always do up too much, but trying to do too little, be skimpy with it, usually means you're going to slightly run out and then freak out because you're using 5-minute epoxy and you've got 4 minutes and 20 seconds left. Trust me, my wife has seen this. She's laughing in the background, I swear. Actually, she's being really super sweet and she's being really quiet in the background. So I'm going to get this done because then we can watch a movie together. Alrighty. And you can see why I like wearing these gloves, because I am going to get epoxy on myself just by moving these little brass bastards in place. Ow. That was my thumb. And you can see what I was talking about. Tiny bit of metal poking out because I made an oopsie. And there. They don't have to be equal on either side. And let's clamp these in place with my teeny tiny little clamps. Somebody asked me once, why isn't this a build channel? You're building stuff. Well, nice and simple. Not very good at filming while building. So, right. This is where a bigger knife, I'd have one clamp between each one of these, but I want to make sure that it's good on this side as well. So I'm going to put one clamp on this side, like that. These little guys have more than enough grip strength for what we're intending, because the epoxy is going to be the thing. Sorry, I'm totally out of frame. Like I said, filming, totally out of frame. There we go. The epoxy is going to be the thing that holds it. So now we just let this dry. Depending on the epoxy you're using, it could be good in 12. I prefer to leave this for about 16 hours. And yeah, basically it should be fine, 12 to 15 hours, but do whatever your epoxy says. If you're wondering what the hell this was, just wax paper or parchment paper. It keeps the countertop from getting too goopy. So yeah, and now to clean up, and I'll see you guys tomorrow when this has cured. And welcome back, day 2. So the epoxy has finished curing. As you can see, there's a little bit of bleed through, and if you're not sure if your epoxy is done, you can always feel it. And if it's tacky, it still needs time to cure. If after 24 full hours it's still tacky, the mix might have been bad, in which case you might have to pull these. But one of the other ways you'll find out if the mix is bad is if these separate while you're trying to work on them. So, right. So what I've got to do is remove all this material. A few different ways to do that. Like I said, I usually use an oscillating tool to cut off this. But if you have a bandsaw, you can cut it off on the bandsaw. Same thing with down here. And then the final shaping. Now, what I noticed, and you'll see it right here, and this is why I don't claim to really be, amazing at this stuff. There's a tiny gap right there, and it's more than likely that while I was putting these pins in, the pins had bent slightly and just kind of pushed that way. So what I should have done is I should have made sure everything was firm up here before the final clamp up. I was rushing, and that was on me. That is Tang, you might hear in the background, and he is wondering what Daddy is doing outside. So just if you hear meowing. Gaps like that can be filled in if you want to do wood dust or something like that, especially if it's just for yourself. Then give me a second. Sorry, he was literally climbing on the screen. You fill in with a little bit of wood dust or whatever you want to do. Sometimes if you're using a colored epoxy, that will fill it in. So yeah, don't worry, we won't be able to hear Tang once I start using the tools. So let's get this going. I've got behind me kind of a couple of options. Like I said, I'll tell you what you can do. If anyone else has any other tips and tricks for people who are just starting out, put them in the comment section below. But you can use for shaping. Obviously, you can use a hacksaw, just take that off. But files, sandpaper, a rasp, any of those can take down the base material. Hell, if you want, put it in and use a spoke shave. So that is up to you how you really want to remove the material. And final shaping is also up to you. What I tend to do is, my hands aren't exactly small. So if I'm making them for someone, I will obviously compare it to my hand. Most of my friends, bare minimum, have slightly smaller hands than me. So if it feels just a tiny bit small in my hand, it's perfect for their gifts and stuff. So yeah. When you get to the final shaping, if you wanted, you could use a belt sander to take down all the rough stuff, like a 3-inch. I've got a detail sander in the closet that I used to use for the final shaping. You can even use the oscillating tool and sand down with that. And okay, this is secure. Try and find a spot higher, because again, you can take off too much accidentally. So other side. I don't know if the recording's picking up my voice anyway, so it didn't want to cut through both walnut slabs at the same time. So I just made a line across one, cut one slab off, and now I'm going to use the remaining slab to guide, or this slab to guide this remaining bit. we go, relatively easy. For some reason, walnut smells like beans. So, anyways, you can use this stuff on your sand belts, and I usually do that at the start. It gets rid of the old glunk that's on there. This is what I'm talking about. When you get close, you might nick it off. So that was my mistake. Now I'm probably going to do is either grind that down into a curve to kind of match up, like grind the metal down in a curve to kind of match up what I end up with the wood, or I'll kind of angle it a little bit, because these are rather chonky. That helped me get pretty close to a relatively finished product. I can do the rest on the belt. So, yeah, we'll do that. that gets us pretty close to our final shape. Now, as I said, it'll grind off the Damascus pattern, and you can etch that back on if you want. Ferric chloride, gator piss, which I can't find in Canada, or the coffee technique. The only thing is, of course, now you've got the scales on there. So one of the other things that someone had told me they could do is fit the scales on here, get all that, do a final etch, and then do a glue up. This is me learning. So, other thing with having these already on, so for instance, I'm going to be taking down pretty much to just outside the bolster and then kind of rounding it back. So it's got a bit of a teardrop. Told you the kid was in the background. But yeah, basically, going to make it so that it's a little skinner because it's got that jimping back here. So let's go do that. You can take off the safety cap on the top if you need to use it for radiusing or anything like that on one of these little guys. Walter Sorrells and Nate from the internet gave me that tip. Now, if you haven't watched either one of them, you can see how you can make knives from very simple things very easily without a lot of work. You can also see the insane shit you can do with a lot of equipment. And that's us, I'd say 90% of the way there. The rest of it is a little bit of taking off the hard edges, removing the tool marks. This is a 120 belt, so I'm probably going to drop down to 80, do a little bit of sanding this way, and then bump up to 120. So I'm just going to set that up so you guys don't have to watch the boring parts again. So I said I had a couple of clamps. There's the other one, believe it or not. This cast aluminum one was like $16, and it's handy because it's got multiple positions. The other one was like $35, the cast iron, steel, whatever. It was like $35. So this is kind of the part where, like, if you had wanted to, you could use your spoke shave or whatever. I have emery rolls, which I will use if I need to, but also over time your belts break, so you can also use them. So I'm just starting with 80 grit, and this is partially to get rid of tool marks and partially to round it over, and at the same time I'm just rounding up here a little bit. And these little, I have a tiny bit hard shoulders, I can take those down with a little bit of sandpaper. You can also use foam sanding blocks if you want. I find those are great for contouring. And I think I'm going to leave the little void that was down here. I rounded this over quite a bit. You can still see a little bit of the Damascus pattern in there. Rounded it over quite a bit, and I think I'm just going to fill that with a little bit of glue. As far as I'm aware, the person I'm making this for, this will actually be their first belt knife, fixed blade knife. So it's not so much it won't matter if it's shitty, it's just they won't have anything else to compare it to. There's also a part, if you wanted to, you could use a file to kind of round things over. And this is a great time to make sure everything's kind of equal how you want it on either side. The reason I'm not using cardboard on this one actually has rubber grips on it, because I think it was originally for jewelry. So like I said, if you wanted to use a file, I'll grab one and kind of show you. With a relatively fine file. Well, just kind of round things over a bit. And I got a hard corner. This is a quick way to do it. The only downside with files is then you're left with tool marks, file marks. So then you gotta kind of sand them out. You know, on some of the kits, the handle material will be like a almost like a plywood with resin impregnation. Those ones I find you don't have to get the edges quite so, or the handle quite so smooth. It actually feels a little bit better if it's a tiny bit rough. This one, which is 180, just to get rid of the worst of those marks. Now, this is not a pro tip, this is definitely a beginner tip, but if you have, for instance, file marks that are going this way, don't try and file up and down to get rid of them. You have to go against them, or kind of crosshatch, or swirl. And don't always do the same way. Change it up, go the other direction. I know what a random orbit sander does? That. But a lot better than I am. Now, this close to the wood, I could be wearing a mask. We've got enough of a breeze that all the sawdust is going that way, but yeah, you can definitely wear a mask. I find the little belts are wonderful for these contours. Now, how fine you go down, how smooth you get your handle, that's going to be up to you. Or if you're doing this for, clients or something like that, sort of up to them. But you can spend a ridiculously long time on this, just getting it down how you want. One of the things I did at the beginning was I always wanted it to be perfect, absolutely perfect. No one's going to like it if it's not perfect. It has to be perfect. It's yours. If you're making this for yourself, it's your bloody knife. Make it for you. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be perfect for you. If you're wondering what's down here, I've got some more sandpaper. Let's see. I'm going to use some 220, and then I'm going to take it up to some 320, I think, and we'll see how it feels. Now, you can use these in a detail sander if you wanted to, palm sander. You can use, like I said, the oscillating tool. I'm just going to be sanding by hand right now, so if you like the sound of that, enjoy the ASMR. If you don't, sorry. My goal here is just to get out the tool marks mostly, kind of give it a bit of a rounded finish. And listen to my neighbor taking down branches of his hazel tree. And the crows in the background. This is going to be really peaceful. You'll see me using different parts of this, corners, stuff like that. It's just honestly to get in to the different areas and sometimes get new, fresh sandpaper. Just want to round over without damaging the pattern, the visible pattern anyways. These little shoulders here. And that's sort of where I'm going to stop. Now I'm going to go get this wiped down. I do wipe the wood with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol, and I wipe off here before I stain it. I also want to get rid of some of the wood in these voids. So I'm going to turn the camera off, go do that, and then I'll be back for staining. And yeah, so I went up to 220 and I thought that was fine. It's actually quite smooth. It fits really well in the hand. So let's go clean it off. Okay, so a little boiled linseed oil. No, I don't make my own. So this stuff is crystallized so much you almost would think I did. And a sock that has a hole in it to wipe it down afterwards. Or you can do like this. Get way too much on the sock, like I just did. And put it on there. Now, I know someone's going to be commenting about should I wipe it down beforehand with ISO or water or whatever. And I've actually had a couple of different people tell me a couple of different things. And most of it comes from woodworkers. So I kind of went with what cabinet maker told me, getting the grain to pop. You can do that with ISO or water. And then if I wanted this to be like an absolute mirror finish, I could polish it up a little bit more, burnish the wood basically. As it is, took it to 220, cleaned it off. I actually couldn't find my ISO, so I did water. And it doesn't really matter one way or the other. And then took 220 to it again, and that just erases the grain, drops it back down again. And that actually feels very good. Now I've got the little gap on the back side that I'll fix off camera, but right now we're pretty close to done. And if you're wondering what I'm going to do with the little gap, I'm actually going to use CA glue to fill the gap. And that'll be that. Try not to cut yourself when you take the tape off. Also try not to bonk the open bottle of boiled linseed oil. If you want to learn how to do things the weird way, watch me. When you're done with your linseed oil, you can always just put it down. I actually have a little bit spilled here, but it doesn't matter. So here's the knife. I'm going to give it a wipe down before I give it to Matty. But yeah, that's the first build of these. And again, this was a set that I bought myself. Let me go grab the sheath, show you what it looks like in that. And also get a paper towel for that boiled linseed oil. cleaned off the spot. Sheath. Finished knife, the sheath. Actually fits in there quite nice. There we go. A little friction fit. If you wanted to, you could wet the leather and get it to fit down, but I think he's going to be rather pleased with that. I know my wife will, because she was the one who requested I make this for him. So yeah, I'll put the, if it's still up on Amazon, I'll put the link to this one down in the description. For now, that's the first of, it's going to be a series of ColdLand knife builds. If you haven't already viewed the unboxing, go view that. I left the links for those knives in the comments, because for some reason the description box didn't want to accept links, for whatever reason. If you have any tips and tricks you want to share with people, feel free to do that. Constructive criticism is welcome. You might have noticed I was a tiny bit negative yesterday. It was very hot, and also one of the reasons why I tend not to do build videos is because I did used to get a lot of negative comments that were not helpful. They were often like, oh, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, stuff like that. I welcome constructive criticism. You'll always see them on the videos. I leave those comments alone, but any of the negative stuff, it's not appreciated. So it just tends to get deleted, especially if it's not helpful at all. Alrighty, this one's going to have been a long video, so I'm going to thank you there. And if you like this video, feel free to like it, feel free to share it, and feel free to subscribe for more videos like this. And go check out ColdLand, both on Amazon.ca. I can't remember, I didn't look to see if you could find them on .com, but check out ColdLand.ca and you can see all of their stuff. You don't have to buy kits. You can buy finished products, but the kits are a wonderful thing, and you'll get better and better as you go on, because I was absolute shit, and now I'm just a little shit. So, thanks guys. Bye.